some of the issues that have come up from the existing research that we've done as part of this Just Transitions project, there are two. So one was, I was going to ask the audience, really, to reflect for a moment, and then if you wanted to share anything, please do. But it was about... everybody in this room has come to a conference about hydrogen. So you're either working in the hydrogen industry or you're working sort of proximate to the hydrogen industry, or you have an interest in it. And we're trying to think about how we can get communities from across the region to share that sort of interest or that engagement, or to share in those careers. So I wondered if we could pass this back to you, is how did you get here? How did you get to the point where you're sitting in a room thinking about hydrogen and wanting to engage in that sector? So it's kind of a what can you learn from your own story that we might be able to take out into those communities and potentially be inspirational for them, because you are the ones who could inspire those people to take up this career. So that was going to be my first question. We don't have very long, so maybe we'll just stick with that one. So I'll give you a moment to think, and then has anyone got any thoughts about that? About why they developed an interest? Yeah.
Hi everyone. I might be the exception to everyone in this room because I have absolutely no interest in hydrogen whatsoever. It just so happens that I work on a hydrogen project. How did I come to be here? I came to be here after 32 years in the civil service, and I wanted to do something different, and the Redcar Hydrogen Village trial came along. Great, that's my community. We're talking net zero. I've just had a grandchild born. This is something that could interest me. Didn't know the first thing about hydrogen. Probably argue that I still don't. I think a lot of what we've talked about today resonates with me because I was in that community during that Hydrogen Village trial. I know what people thought. I know what their experiences were. I think a gentleman touched on it earlier, people in those communities have bigger life problems than worrying about net zero. And that's a massive challenge in terms of getting them interested. We have an outreach programme, we have an education team that go out and are constantly busy speaking from everywhere, from primary schools to scouts and guides and right up to secondary education, colleges, etc. And that's amazing. We had opportunities tenfold for the community to get involved with the project and learn about the project and what was coming and the jobs that could be created. The massive thing we struggled with was a mistrust of a gas company that's actually been delivering gas safely to you for 40 odd years, a mistrust of the government because, let's face it, who can you trust? A mistrust of the companies that swoop in and splash all their cash about in community funding, but are they in it for the long term because we've seen industry decline? So they have big world problems and a massive issue with mistrust. And I think that's a big blocker to how we get people on board. I'm not saying it's not achievable, I think it is, but it might take generations as opposed to a few years. You know, I can see the little faces lighting up as they talk to our educators, etc., about, you know, the possibilities. And we hope that they come home and talk to the parents about those kinds of things, and they probably do. But if that parent's worried that day about how they're paying the fuel bill tomorrow or what food they're putting on the table, doesn't seem such a big issue, and it's something that they'll deal with in the future. So yes, I'm involved in hydrogen, I'm involved in net zero, but I'm not from that kind of background, and I am just your ordinary Joe. I know nothing about it, and everything I learn every day is a learning curve for me. But people are interested in jobs, what puts food on the table, and the likes of that, not necessarily that net zero journey. So I might have gone a little bit off kilt there, but so I'm not in the hydrogen industry because I know anything about hydrogen.
No, thank you. That's brilliant. Yeah, that's really. That sort of touched a little bit on what the second question I was going to ask, which is partly about trust, but also about the other aspect of this is around emotions. So whenever we talk about jobs and the thousands of jobs and the billions of pounds of investment, and you know, a lot of those headlines that come from the Tees Valley Combined Authority, from local authorities, from industry, and from some of the research that we've done, it has that idea of hope, right? This is about hope for the future, hope for future generations, hope for a region that has suffered industrial decline for a very long period of time. But that in some ways is a bit of a double-edged sword, because if those hopes are not realised, then does that further entrench distrust and distrust of government, distrust of industry? So there's this, whenever you get people's hopes up, you can also dash those hopes if it doesn't, if you overhype it or you oversell it or those kinds of things. So one big aspect of this just transition is kind of managing that as well. I just wondered if anyone had any thoughts about that process, because everyone wants to sort of be positive about the jobs in the future and the potential and the carbon savings and all the sort of positive stories, but how do we avoid that problem?
I think it comes down to answering the question of so what. For the average Joe, there's going to be this fantastic hydrogen plant, and it's all, but it's however long down the line. So what? Am I going to get a job or not? And what am I going to get in the meantime? I'll give you a really sort of small example. There's a school that we're working very closely with, and they have an eco shop. Now, the eco shop isn't about saving massive amounts of carbon, but that's how it's sold. Families who might struggle to feed their kids come along to the eco shop. They can have 10 items for, I think it's £1, and we sell it as it's a climate thing. So it takes away the stigma of going to a food bank. It's not a food bank; it's an eco shop. In the meantime, all that food doesn't go to waste. So by giving them a hook, something that helps them, we can then engage them in conversations about food waste, about climate change, about CO2. And once we've got their trust, we can actually engage them in more stuff. So for this example, what if we could do that education stuff? What if we could get them involved by giving them something first, and then continue that conversation into this is how you eventually, or your children, will get a job in the hydrogen industry.
That's great, thank you. Just that here.
Yeah, I've worked at Tees Works, and I've seen the jobs that there are that aren't the jobs that have been promised yet. But every time you see anything on social media, on LinkedIn, it's quite often from TVCA saying all of these jobs, there's loads of comments saying, where are these jobs? Where are these jobs? When are they coming? And there's a huge mistrust there. But there are jobs there already. There are already people working there. And I don't think, I've never seen anything specifically published to say what jobs have already been created. I don't know if that would help. Because I've worked there, I've seen it. There are people working. There are a lot of people working there, but nobody's seeing that at the minute. I don't know. My brother's not working there, so nobody in my family's working there. The jobs must not exist, and it does affect people, and that's a regular thing. That's on social media all of the time. Coincidentally, I did a degree apprenticeship with ICI. Okay. There's no way my family would have been able to pay for me to go through a degree from Redcar. So that's how I ended up where I am.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
and ICI no longer exists, but there are lots of companies that still do degree apprenticeships, like Johnson Matthey, for example. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you.
Hello, thank you for the excellent comments across the room and the panel. My name is Patrice Burnside. I'm with eForward. We are a membership community for senior leaders in the energy transition. And I look after the academic community, but I come from a membership background. If I take that hat off for a moment and put on another one, I'm also involved in the Co-op National Members Council, and the idea of cooperation, to kind of address both of the questions that you posed, strikes me as one of those avenues that could be explored. How do we manage expectations? How do we cultivate hope? And how do we engage? And how do we educate and inform? I will be honest with you, I don't have a STEM background. I did journalism and then creative writing and forced migration. None of that's actually STEM. And I feel at times uncomfortable being in the presence of all of these experts here in the room. But I know that I can't let that stop me from being in this room and doing that engagement, because in a way it allows me to connect with the communities that you have described and to be comfortable to sit with that. So I want to pose this idea that cooperative energy, where the community owns it and is engaged with it, is a really exciting opportunity to look at. And I don't know a whole lot, I don't know anything off the top of my mind to what extent hydrogen kind of features into that presently. But if anybody is not familiar with the cooperative model, it's where the members of the organization own a piece of that, participate democratically, might have economic ownership, social ownership, etc. And it started in Manchester, as a way of addressing this need where people were left out, isolated, their needs weren't being met, they weren't being met in a safe way. And people bandied together to put together solutions that would support communities who've been left behind. So it's something you can tell I'm very passionate about, but equally about the education piece here. And really look forward to speaking with anybody who might want to connect on that. I will just quickly add, eForward is a sister brand to Energy Voice, which is one of the largest energy publications in market. And if there's ever an opportunity where we might be able to help highlight and amplify the activity taking place in this room or beyond, just get in touch. Shall I pass it to this gentleman who raised his hand?
Yes, thank you.
It's more of a comment. I suppose it was a comment on how do we measure impact and success, especially when you're talking about communities. When we mentioned about areas of deprivation tend to always be areas of deprivation, because if you're born into that area and you aspire to do better, you move out. So that area doesn't improve, you just move on to an area where you can afford to live. So unless you're willing to incentivise people to stay or invest in the area of deprivation, you're always going to have them. So how are we going to measure that we've succeeded? We might have brought industry, but we build new houses to accommodate the people. So the area of deprivation needs to be, if you like, approached as an individual issue, and that area needs to be improved as well, not just the people.
I absolutely agree. I'm not sure I have a solution, but yes, that is. I think the other point maybe about when we talk about Teesside or the Tees Valley in quite a homogenized way, but actually within Teesside there are massive differences in terms of health outcomes, income. It's even just very geographically close areas in Stockton, from Yarm to the centre of Stockton, is completely different. Geography, completely different place in some ways. So when we're thinking about a strategy for a hydrogen economy in the Tees Valley, we need to be aware of that variation as well. And you're totally right that deprived areas might stay deprived if all the people who get the jobs in the hydrogen industry move to Yarm or Eagles Cliff. So yeah, there is that persistent challenge, I think, that goes beyond just one industry. Yeah. So it's a bit of a downbeat ending, but thank you everyone for your contributions there. That was brilliant.